Okay, so let's jump right in. How is it even possible that a bunch of seemingly random digital files, I'm talking an academic paper on language, a serious human rights report, and even a tech article about AI, how can all of that tell one single powerful human story? It sounds kind of crazy, right? Well, today we're going to unravel that mystery together.
So, just look at this. On one hand, you've got this super dense academic text, the kind filled with linguistic jargon, and on the other, a slick, modern article from a tech blog. I mean, they couldn't feel more different, right? Worlds apart. But here's the thing. These aren't just random documents. They are, believe it or not, two crucial pieces of the very same puzzle. So the big question is, what exactly is the puzzle we're building here?
All right, let's get started. We're going to take these scattered fragments and piece them together to build a complete picture. And you're about to see how information that looks totally disconnected can actually come together to tell an incredible story of identity, of crisis, and ultimately of resilience.
So what is that single thread connecting all of these totally different sources? Well, it's a community you've probably never heard of, the Irob people. They're an indigenous community living in a really remote mountainous region right on the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And their story is the key. It's what makes all of these puzzle pieces finally click into place.
So if we really want to understand the Irob people, we have to start with the absolute cornerstone of their culture, and that is their language.
So, digging into this really interesting thesis from Addis Ababa University, we find out that the Irob speak a specific dialect of a language called Saho. Now, Saho is what's known as a lowland East Cushitic language. And that little detail, it actually tells us a ton about their history, their roots, and how they relate to the other peoples in that region.
And check this out. This linguistic family tree really visualizes it perfectly. You can see right here how Saho branches off from what's called Proto-East Cushitic, and it's super closely related to the Afar language. This might look like just another dry academic diagram, but it's not. It's basically a map of ancient history, of migrations and cultural connections, all preserved in the DNA of the language itself. How cool is that?
But here's where it gets really serious. The thesis makes a crucial point. The Irob dialect isn't just one of the least studied languages. It's also one of the most endangered, and that is a huge deal. It means their entire unique identity, their whole cultural memory, is literally at risk of just disappearing. The language is incredibly vulnerable, and as we're about to find out, so are the people who speak it.
And just to give you a real tangible sense of this language, look at this. The academic source points out something fascinating about how they make plurals. It's not like in English where you just add an S. Note, it's this super complex process where the plural is a completely different word. So for example, Aka, which means son, becomes Iro for sons. It's just a little glimpse, but it shows you what a unique and complex linguistic world we're talking about.
But like I hinted at, the threat to the Irob people, it goes way beyond just their language. Our next piece of the puzzle comes from another university thesis, and this one documents a very, very serious human rights crisis.
And the thesis starts by defining a specific, chilling crime against humanity: enforced disappearance. We have to be really clear here. This is not just a kidnapping. This is a state-sanctioned act of completely erasing a person, denying they ever existed, and ripping them away from any and all protection of the law. It's terrifying.
And according to this research, this is exactly what happened to the Irob people. During the border war, more than 90 innocent Irob civilians, we're talking farmers, priests, local leaders, were forcibly disappeared by Eritrean armed forces. Over 90 people.
But, 90, it's just a number. It's easy to hear and move on. But this isn't just a statistic. The appendix of the thesis actually lists their names. People like Adayu Miras Tesfu, Alema Tessima Gabre. These were real people with families, with lives. They were taken from their homes, and they have never been heard from again.
So when you're faced with the threat of your culture, and even your people being erased, what do? You fight back. And in the 21st century, a huge part of that fight happens online, which brings us to our next set of puzzle pieces.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? How do you fight back effectively? Well, this guide for nonprofits kind of gives us the playbook. It lays out exactly how to use digital platforms to tell your story, to build trust, and to get people to take action. You can think of it as a blueprint, really, for modern digital advocacy.
And what's so powerful is when you look at the Irob Advocacy Association's website, you see this theory being put into practice, step by step. The guide says to share beneficiary stories, and bam, they have a page dedicated to the abductees with their names and stories. The guide says use mission-driven narratives, and there it is, a whole section on their site preserving their history and culture. This isn't just a website, it's a weapon in their fight for survival.
And it goes way beyond just the website. We're talking about a full digital toolkit here. They're running active social media campaigns to get the word out, using fundraising platforms to get critical support to their community, and they're networking with journalists and aid groups to amplify their story on the world stage. It is a modern, coordinated, and frankly, heroic effort to refuse to be erased.
So there you have it. We've taken these disparate fragments and pieced together this powerful story. But the story of the Irob, discovered in these digital clues, it doesn't just tell us about them. It actually shines a massive spotlight on a challenge that affects every single one of us. How do we find what's true in this incredibly complex digital world we all live in?
I mean, think about it. We are all swimming in a sea of information every single day. And if a story this important, this human, can be essentially hidden in plain sight, just scattered in pieces across the web, then how do any of us find solid ground? How do we figure out what's real and what's not?
Well, the answer, or at least a big part of it, lies in the very process we just walked through together. It's all about verification. Simple but powerful things, like academic and journalistic standards, proper citation. Those are our tools. They're what allowed us to trace each fragment back to a credible source, a university thesis, a detailed report. That's how we build a reliable picture, not just of this story, but of the world.
Okay, but finding the sources, that's really only half the battle. Because what about the invisible forces that shape what information we even get to see in the first place? For communities like the Irob, there are massive, powerful systems that often control which stories get told and which get buried.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. That tech article. It's a stark reminder that the platforms we all use to find information, search engines, AI assistants, they are not neutral. They collect our data, they use our location, and their algorithms are making decisions every second about what trends, what gets promoted, and what stories, like the Irobs, might remain buried. The very digital spaces where they are fighting for survival are controlled by forces that can, intentionally or not, make them invisible.
So, what have we seen? We've gone from an endangered language to a devastating human rights crisis to a digital fight for survival. The story of the Irob shows us so clearly that the full picture, the real story, is never just handed to you on a silver platter. It has to be pieced together, fragment by fragment, which leaves us with one last big question. What's our role in all this? What part will you play in piecing it together?